The wind howled through the desolate woods, carrying with it the scent of decaying leaves and something far more sinister. Eliza's footsteps echoed in the empty forest, each step hesitant, as if the very ground beneath her was alive, waiting for the perfect moment to swallow her whole. She had taken the wrong path. It was supposed to be a simple hike, a break from the monotony of her life in the city. Her friends had warned her about the old forest, about the stories that surrounded it, but she had brushed them off. Folktales, she had thought. Nothing more than tales told to frighten children. Yet now, standing alone on a trail that had long been abandoned, she wasn't so sure. The trees here were different, taller, darker, their branches twisting into unnatural shapes that clawed at the sky. And there was that sound, a faint whisper like the rustling of leaves, but no wind was blowing. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere, wrapping around her, teasing her, drawing her deeper into the forest. She should turn back. Every instinct screamed at her to run, but curiosity, that damned curiosity, kept her moving forward. What harm could a few more steps do? As she rounded a bend in the trail, the whispering grew louder, more distinct, and Eliza realized with a jolt that it wasn't the trees whispering, it was voices. Faint, almost imperceptible, but there. She strained to make out the words, but they slipped through her grasp like smoke. Suddenly, the trail ended, and Eliza found herself standing at the edge of a clearing. In the center stood an old, crumbling mansion, its windows dark and empty, like the eyes of a corpse. The sight of it sent a shiver down her spine. This was no ordinary house. There was a weight to it, a presence that pressed down on her, making it hard to breathe. The whispers grew louder, more insistent, urging her to enter. She shook her head, trying to dispel the unease that had settled over her, but the feeling only grew stronger. She stepped forward, her foot crunching on something beneath her. She looked down and froze, both scattered across the ground, half buried in the dirt, as if the earth itself was trying to reclaim them. Eliza's heart raced. Every part of her screamed to leave, but the whispers, those damn whispers, kept her rooted to the spot. They were clearer now, almost as if they were inside her head. "Come inside," they seemed to say. "Join us." Before she knew what she was doing, she had crossed the clearing and was standing at the mansion's front door. The wood was rotting, the paint peeling away in long, curling strips. She reached out, her hand trembling, and pushed the door open. It swung inward with a creak that echoed through the empty halls, and as it did, the whispers stopped. Silence, but not the peaceful kind. This silence was thick, oppressive, filled with the promise of something terrible just out of sight. Eliza hesitated, her breath coming in shallow gasps. She should leave. She should turn around and run back the way she came, forget she had ever seen this place. But then, from somewhere deep within the mansion, came a sound, a soft, whispering laugh. And against her better judgment, Eliza stepped inside. The air inside the mansion was colder than it had any right to be, almost freezing. It clawed at her skin, sinking into her bones, but Eliza barely noticed. Her attention was fixed on the shadows that seemed to writhe and twist at the edges of her vision, never staying still, never fully revealing themselves. She moved deeper into the house, her footsteps echoing in the vast, empty space. The interior was in ruins, the walls cracked and crumbling, the floorboards creaking ominously with every step. Cobwebs hung like tattered curtains from the ceiling, and the faint smell of mildew mixed with something far more pungent, something that made her stomach turn. But it was the silence that unnerved her the most. The complete and utter absence of sound, as if the house itself was holding its breath, waiting for something. The whispers that had lured her inside were gone, replaced by this heavy, suffocating quiet. Eliza's heart pounded in her chest, each beat loud and frantic in the oppressive stillness. She knew she should turn back, leave this place and never return, but something kept her moving forward, as if an unseen force was guiding her deeper into the mansion. She reached the grand staircase that dominated the foyer, its once majestic banister now splintered and broken. The steps groaned under her weight as she ascended, the sound unnaturally loud in the otherwise silent house. As she reached the top, she hesitated, unsure of where to go next. Then she saw it, a faint glow emanating from beneath a door at the end of the hallway. Eliza approached cautiously, her hand hovering over the doorknob. The closer she got, the stronger the feeling of unease became, but she couldn't stop herself. She had to know what was behind that door. Taking a deep breath, she turned the knob and pushed the door open. The room beyond was bathed in a pale, ghostly light, but its source was unclear. The furniture was old, covered in dust and cobwebs, and the air was thick with the smell of rot. But it was the figure standing in the center of the room that made Eliza's blood run cold. A woman, her back turned to Eliza, her long, dark hair hanging in matted strands down her back. She was wearing a tattered dress, once white but now stained with age and dirt. Eliza opened her mouth to speak, to ask who she was, but no sound came out. The woman began to hum softly, a haunting melody that sent chills down Eliza's spine. Slowly, she turned to face her, and Eliza gasped. The woman's face was pale, almost translucent, her eyes hollow and filled with an unnatural darkness. But it was her mouth that drew Eliza's attention. A wide, unnerving smile that stretched far too wide, revealing rows of sharp, pointed teeth. Eliza took a step back, her heart hammering in her chest. She wanted to run, to flee this nightmare, but her feet were rooted to the spot. The woman took a step towards her, her smile widening. "You've come to join us," the woman whispered, her voice soft and melodic, but with an edge that made Eliza's skin crawl. Eliza shook her head, finally finding her voice. "No, I need to leave," she stammered. The woman's smile faltered, her eyes narrowing. "Leave? But you just got here. And besides..." She glanced over Eliza's shoulder, and Eliza turned to look. The door was gone. In its place was a solid wall, the same as the rest of the room. Eliza's heart sank. She was trapped. The woman laughed, a cold, hollow sound that echoed through the room. "You're one of us now," she whispered, her voice low and menacing. "You can never leave." Eliza turned back to the woman, her fear giving way to a rising sense of panic. "What do you mean? What is this place?" The woman's smile returned, wider and more sinister than before. "This is the mansion of the Whispering Shadows," she said, her voice dripping with malice. "And you, my dear, are our newest guest." The shadows in the room seemed to pulse with the woman's words, growing darker, thicker, until they were almost tangible, pressing in on Eliza from all sides. She could feel them, cold and clammy, like the touch of death itself. Eliza tried to scream, but the sound died in her throat. The shadows closed in, and the last thing she saw before they consumed her was the woman's smile, sharp and gleaming in the darkness. Eliza awoke to pitch-black darkness, her body cold and aching. She tried to move, but her limbs felt heavy, almost as if they were being weighed down by an invisible force. Panic surged through her as she remembered the woman, the shadows, and the sinister mansion. Was it a dream? But the cold, oppressive silence told her otherwise. She forced herself to sit up, her movements sluggish, as if the air itself was trying to hold her down. The darkness around her was thick and impenetrable, pressing in from all sides. She strained her ears, listening for any sound, any sign of life, but there was nothing. Just an eerie, suffocating silence. Then from the depths of the darkness came a faint, raspy voice. "Eliza!" Her heart skipped a beat. The voice was familiar, but she couldn't place it. It seemed to come from everywhere at once, surrounding her, filling her mind. "Eliza!" It called again, this time louder, more insistent. It was close, far too close. "Who's there?" Eliza croaked, her voice trembling. She tried to stand, but her legs wobbled, barely holding her weight. The air felt thicker now, as if the darkness itself was alive, pressing in on her, choking her. "Find me," the voice whispered, so close it felt as if someone was breathing down her neck. She whipped around, but there was nothing there, just more darkness, endless and suffocating. Eliza took a shaky step forward, then another, her hands outstretched, trying to feel her way through the void. Her fingers brushed against something cold and solid, a wall, slick with moisture. She followed the wall, her fingers trailing along its surface, guiding her through the darkness. The voice grew louder, more urgent, echoing in her ears, driving her forward. Her breath came in short, ragged gasps as she stumbled through the blackness, every step filled with dread. Suddenly, the wall ended, and she stepped into a small, dimly lit room. The light was weak, barely enough to see by, but it was a welcome change from the stifling darkness. The room was empty, save for a small, dust-covered mirror hanging on the far wall. Eliza hesitated, her heart pounding in her chest. The voice was silent now, the air thick with anticipation. Slowly, she approached the mirror, her reflection barely visible in the dirty glass. Her skin was pale, her eyes wide and filled with fear. And then she saw it, a shadow, moving behind her reflection. She spun around, but there was nothing there. When she turned back to the mirror, the shadow was gone. "Look closer," the voice whispered, sending a chill down her spine. Eliza leaned in, her face inches from the glass. The mirror fogged slightly with her breath, and as she wiped it away, she saw something. A faint image, distorted and twisted. It was her, but not her. The reflection stared back at her, its eyes hollow, its smile twisted into something inhuman. She gasped, stumbling back from the mirror, her heart racing. The reflection didn't move, its smile growing wider, more sinister. And then, without warning, it reached out from the glass, its hand dark and twisted, fingers like claws. Eliza screamed and tried to run, but the hand grabbed her wrist, pulling her toward the mirror. The glass rippled like water as her reflection pulled her closer, its eyes glowing with a malevolent light. "Join us," it hissed, its voice low and filled with malice. Eliza struggled, but the grip was too strong. The reflection yanked her forward, and she felt herself being pulled into the mirror, the world around her twisting and warping as the glass swallowed her whole. When Eliza opened her eyes, she found herself in a place that looked like the mansion, but twisted, wrong. The walls were warped, the floors uneven, and everything was bathed in an eerie, sickly light. The air was thick with a foul stench, and the whispers were back, louder than ever, echoing through the distorted halls. She stumbled to her feet, her heart pounding in her chest. Where was she? Was this some kind of nightmare? She didn't know, but she had to find a way out, before the shadows claimed her like they had the others. As she moved through the twisted version of the mansion, the whispers grew louder, more insistent. They seemed to come from everywhere, guiding her, urging her deeper into the heart of the nightmare. The walls seemed to pulse with life, shadows writhing just out of sight, always lurking, always watching. She reached a door at the end of a long, narrow hallway, the whispers now deafening, a cacophony of voices calling her name, urging her to enter. With trembling hands, she pushed the door open and stepped inside. The room beyond was vast, impossibly large, with walls that stretched up into darkness. In the center stood a large, ornate mirror, its surface polished and gleaming, reflecting nothing but darkness. The air in the room was thick with a sense of foreboding, the shadows more oppressive than ever. And then she saw them, figures, faint and ghostly, moving within the mirror, their faces twisted in agony, their eyes hollow and lifeless. They were trapped, imprisoned in the glass, their souls bound to the darkness. Eliza took a step back, her heart pounding in her chest. She had to get out, had to escape before the mirror claimed her too. But as she turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind her, the sound echoing through the empty room. She was trapped. The whispers grew louder, filling her mind, driving her to the edge of madness. The figures in the mirror pressed against the glass, their hands reaching out, their faces contorted in silent screams. They wanted out. They wanted to be free. And then, from the darkness, she heard it, the voice. Eliza! It was soft, almost gentle, but filled with a terrible power. It called to her, beckoning her closer to the mirror. She tried to resist, but the pull was too strong, dragging her towards the glass, towards the figures that writhed and twisted within. "Join us," the voice whispered, a cold breath against her ear. Eliza screamed, but the sound was swallowed by the darkness. The mirror loomed before her, the figures inside more desperate, more frenzied. And then she saw it, her own reflection, standing among them, her eyes hollow, her mouth twisted into that same terrible smile. "You are one of us now," the reflection whispered, its voice a chorus of the trapped souls. Eliza's hand reached out, almost against her will, her fingers brushing the cold surface of the mirror. The glass rippled like water, and she felt a cold, icy grip on her soul, pulling her in, dragging her into the darkness. And then, just as she was about to be consumed, she heard another voice, faint, distant, but unmistakable. "Eliza, fight it." It was her mother's voice, clear and strong, cutting through the darkness. The warmth of it gave Eliza strength, a spark of hope in the endless void. She pulled back, resisting the mirror's pull, fighting against the darkness that sought to claim her. The figures in the mirror screamed in anger, their hands clawing at the glass, desperate to drag her back. But Eliza fought with every ounce of strength she had, pulling away, back towards the light, back towards freedom. With a final, desperate effort, she tore herself away from the mirror, stumbling back into the room, her heart pounding in her chest. The mirror shattered, the figures inside howling in despair as they were consumed by the darkness, their twisted faces dissolving into the void. The room around her began to collapse, the walls crumbling, the floor giving way beneath her feet. Eliza ran, the darkness closing in around her, the whispers turning to screams, but she didn't look back. She burst through the door, back into the twisted halls of the mansion, the walls warping and twisting as the house began to unravel. She ran, her breath coming in ragged gasps, her heart pounding in her chest. The darkness was right behind her, the shadows reaching out to drag her back, but she kept running, kept fighting. Finally, she saw it, a faint, flickering light, a beacon in the darkness. She sprinted towards it, her legs burning, her lungs screaming for air. The light grew brighter, stronger, and then, with a final, desperate leap, she was through. Eliza fell to the ground, gasping for breath, the cold night air filling her lungs. She was outside, lying on the damp earth, the twisted mansion looming behind her, its windows dark and empty, like hollow eyes staring into the void. She struggled to her feet, her body trembling, her mind reeling from the horror she had just escaped. The mansion was silent, the whispers gone, the darkness receding into the shadows. But she knew it wasn't over, not yet. She turned to face the mansion, her eyes narrowing. This place, this cursed house, had taken too many lives, trapped too many souls in its twisted grasp. She couldn't leave it standing, couldn't let it claim another victim. With a surge of determination, she ran back into the forest, searching for something, anything that could help her destroy the mansion. She stumbled upon an old, rusted can of gasoline, half buried in the undergrowth. It was covered in dirt, the label faded and peeling, but it would have to do. Eliza dragged the can back to the mansion, her arms burning with the effort. She didn't stop to think, didn't let fear or doubt cloud her mind. She had to end this once and for all. She poured the gasoline around the base of the mansion, the pungent smell filling the air. The shadows within the house seemed to stir, restless and angry, but she didn't care. She struck a match, the flame flickering in the cold night air, and tossed it into the gasoline. The fire caught instantly, roaring to life with a ferocity that took her breath away. The flames licked at the walls, climbing higher and higher, devouring the old wood, the darkness inside screaming in fury as it was consumed by the light. Eliza stepped back, watching as the mansion burned, the flames reflecting in her eyes. The whispers were gone, the shadows destroyed, and with them, the souls trapped within were finally free. The fire raged for hours, the heat intense, the flames reaching up to the sky. And when it was over, all that was left was a pile of smoldering ashes, the twisted mansion reduced to nothing more than a memory. Eliza stood there for a long time, staring at the ashes, her heart heavy with the weight of what she had done. She had destroyed the mansion, freed the souls trapped within, but at what cost? The darkness had left its mark on her, a scar that would never fully heal. But she was alive. She had survived the whispering shadows, and that was enough. For now. With a final, lingering look at the ashes, Eliza turned and walked away, the first rays of dawn breaking over the horizon. The forest was silent, the air fresh and clean, the scent of smoke lingering in the distance. As she walked, she could almost hear a faint whisper, carried on the wind. "Thank you." Eliza paused, a small smile tugging at the corners of her mouth. Then, without another word, she continued on, leaving the past behind her, walking into the light of a new day. Years passed, and the story of the Whispering Shadows became nothing more than a ghost story, a tale told around campfires to scare children. The mansion was forgotten, the land overgrown with trees and vines, nature reclaiming what had once been lost. But the darkness never truly left. One day, a young couple, new to the town, stumbled upon the old, overgrown path while exploring the woods. They followed it, curious, their laughter echoing through the trees. At the end of the path, they found a clearing, and in the center of that clearing, the remains of an old, burned-down mansion. The air was thick with an unsettling silence, the shadows long and deep. And in the center of the clearing, buried beneath the ashes, something stirred. The couple didn't notice. They turned back, their footsteps fading into the distance, leaving the clearing behind. But as they left, the shadows moved, twisting and writhing, coalescing into something dark and formless, something old and hungry. The Whispering Shadows were not gone. They were waiting, biding their time, ready to claim the next soul foolish enough to enter their domain. And in the silence that followed, a faint whisper echoed through the trees, carrying with it a promise of terror yet to come. "We are always here,"